receiving and using counselling skills feedback. I love this topic. So we do our counselling skills. We are doing our simulated skills, maybe in a triad pair. Maybe we've got tutor looking over that. How do we give feedback? How do we receive the feedback? How do we implement that feedback? If you're feeding back to a peer on their skills, you don't want to criticize them, but you might see something that will help or guide them. And how can we put it in a way that is useful? Or how can we receive it in a way that is useful? What's your thoughts, Rory?
I think it's interesting. And I thought you wouldn't ask someone who's learning to drive to give feedback to someone who is learning to drive, because they're still learning. And I think that's the key. When you're in maybe a little triad, usually there's an observer, and then there's a person who plays the role of the client, and then there's someone who plays the role of the counsellor. They usually call that the helper. And I think that if you are going to do feedback, the best way to do that is after the session, the person who was client feeds back first, because it's their session. So their experience is probably a bit more authoritative than the observer, because it's all about the person being listened to. And then the observer can give feedback. And I think when we're giving feedback, we should look at the kind of skills being used. So I think a tutor would almost certainly say to their students, we're going to look at the use of reflecting and paraphrasing. We're going to use the skill of questioning. First of all, be very clear on the skill you're being asked to observe and stick with that skill. And I think also realize that even professionals who use counselling skills don't always get it right. We're human beings, and we're apt to cognitive biases and misinterpretations and misattunement. So I think when you're giving your feedback, just be curious and say things like, I wonder what had happened if you'd have just extended that silence a little longer. Or I wonder what had happened if you'd have reflected this part of the person's story back instead of that one. Try to be quite analytical with it, as opposed to saying, didn't reflect that back very well and you could have done this, because it'll be your turn at some point to have your skills fed back to. And you would hope that the person is as thoughtful to you as you are to the person you gave feedback to. So I think that's my starting position, Ken.
I think it's a very good starting position, Rory. Very informed from many years of tutoring and watching feedback. So feedback can, for some, be difficult to take and to receive. And for some, it can be difficult to give. I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. A great strategy for feedback, if you do spot an area where that person might improve, is, as you said, Rory, to plan how you structure that around how they can improve, not where it fell short. If you reflected back the feelings the client was expressing rather than just what they said, that might have been a bit more effective. So you're giving a constructive piece of feedback, and always sandwich the feedback between two really positive statements. So I really loved how you were present. Your active listening was incredible. Then you put in the little bit of constructive feedback, and then you immediately go into, but what I really enjoyed was the way you ended that session and how you did a little summary at the end and really tied up all the loose ends. There, you've got a little package that you hand to somebody that feels balanced and it has information in it that is useful to that person. And here's an exercise I'm going to share. Take your skills that you learn. So you've got silence, reflection. Write the skills down, on a document. And then put a little description of what the skill is. Just 2 lines of what the skill is. And then ask yourself the following questions. What does this skill do for the counsellor, and what does this skill do for the client? So why do we paraphrase something? What does that do for the client? They hear their story back from another person's point of view, and they may see it with new eyes, or it may make them feel that person has understood me and listened to me. Why is paraphrasing important to the counsellor? It's important to the counsellor because we might paraphrase something back and the client may go, no, it's not really like that. It's like this. So we can make sure that we're in the right frame of reference. So write what the skill is, what the skill does for the client, what the skill does for the counsellor, and have that as a key. You'll use it throughout your studies. When observing somebody else's skills, you can see, they've used the skill of silence. Then you look, silence, what is it? What's the definition? What does it do for the client? What does it do for the counsellor? And it gives you more of a scope for feeding back because you got the skill, its definition and how it is used and what it does right there. And you can ask yourself, did it do what it was supposed to do? Was that skill effective in that context? And it just gives you more information, I think, to feed back if you have the theory, as it were, of the skills on hand. Because here's the truth. One counsellor may use silence, another one may use an open question, another one may use a reflection, another one may use a paraphrase, all for the same presentation. And guess what? Every single one of them might be effective. And every single one of them might be wrong or ineffective in the way the skill was used or the place it was used in. So it's not so much a case of I wouldn't have used that skill there. It's was the skill effective? And if it was, why was it effective? And if it wasn't effective, why was it not effective? And what skill might have been more effective? So this is a great technique for giving feedback. But I tell you what, it's a cracking technique for your own skills. If you're able to record them or look back on them and you say, I used silence there. Was that effective? Did it do what it needed to do? Did it give space for the client to think and come back? Did it feel inappropriate? Did it feel uncomfortable? That's a great place to start with feedback.
Yeah. And I'm also a great advocate of recording skills because Rogers himself pioneered this in the 1950s. He spent eye-watering amounts of money on big reel-to-reel tape recorders, and there's lots of testimony of Rogers students huddling around these recorders, listening very carefully to the interaction and how the client responded. And I think there's great value in that because you can have someone who's absolutely brilliant at using counselling skills. I remember many years ago observing a student, a masterclass in counselling skills. And I said to her at the end, how did you feel about the interaction? She said, I didn't feel anything at all. And I said, that's the area you need to work on. I said, you've managed to master the chords of the instrument, but what you need to do is you need to put the passion and for that to be transmitted. It's like playing a riff on a guitar. It's technically very good, but there's no soul to it. There's no passion to it. So I'm a great believer in recording and all huddling around the recording and saying, this is interesting and that's interesting. And I think it's a less combative way of assessing skills because everybody's learning. If you have a triad, you can all get involved and play it back because there's always something you miss. That's the thing. Our memories are very fallible, really, but the recordings aren't. So certainly I think when you get into diploma and above, and indeed at certificate level, recordings are always useful because you can use it to either transcribe or to observe. But my final observation on counselling skills is not to be too hard on yourself. I could tell you as a qualified therapist of many years, I made some howlers in my use of skills because I'm human. I make mistakes. And I think it's to be honest of ourselves and say that sometimes we're not going to get it right 100% of the time. I think that takes the pressure off because a lot of students believe they have to get it right all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a great aspiration. But I think the reality of it is that it puts a massive unrealistic expectation on your shoulders, which actually probably makes you withdraw from using skills because you find they're getting it wrong.
Yeah, very much. Kind to self. I was in practice for a good number of years and you're always learning. Let me put it that way. Always learning, reflecting back on a session going, wow, I could have used something different there. My final thoughts on this is look to your course provider, look to your learning provider and see if they have observation sheet templates. We certainly use them. When you were training counsellors, Rory, there was an observation sheet where you were given some areas or elements that you could focus on. And I know that CPCAB, who are a training operator, the largest in the UK of training counsellors and psychotherapists, they have peer observation sheets. And it gives you a framework to work within. It goes through the contracting area, working with an ethical framework, limits of availability, confidentiality. It's also got whether a person used certain skills and how effective those were. And it just takes you through a guided process of what to be observing if you're going to be giving some feedback, and gives you some boxes that you can write in to pass that information over. Ask your learning provider, say, is there a form or a paper that we can use for that feedback, or a framework we can use for it? And if there isn't one, go look online and go and find one that works for you. Any final thoughts on feedback in skills, Rory?
I think just practice. I did read somewhere that you have to practice a skill 1,000 times before you gain competence. I don't know how true that is, but it sounds like it's got some basis in truth. And you say practice makes perfect. Now, don't be put off by feedback that says we could do better there. And I think my final view is that you don't have to take all feedback. Someone might give you feedback and it might not actually be accurate. So look for a continuity of feedback. If you've got 3 sessions where someone's different is telling you the same thing, then that's probably going to be right. So don't be too hard on yourself. Keep going and carry with you that every student went through the same arc of learning. And to some extent, when we're in practice, still did. So there's no total mastery of anything. It's a commitment to keep those skills honed. Don't be too hard on yourself. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. There's something we've covered a number of times. If you're a student right now and you have these skill sessions, you're breaking out and you're going, oh, I've got to put in a bit of silence and a bit of paraphrasing, and I've got to put in an open question and a clarifier, and you're going through, and it feels hard, and you've got to think of everything. When the person's speaking, you're thinking, what skill am I going to use here? What's going to be the right skill for this place? Here's the truth of it. That will eventually go away, and it will just become unconscious competence. It really will. It's like driving a car. When you first got in the car, you go, oh, I've got to push in the clutch now, and I've got to change the gear, or even in an automatic, now I've got to indicate first, and I've got to check the side mirror and the back mirror and look over my shoulder before I change lanes. There's all these mental processes that are playing out. And I bet if you're a driver and you drive regularly now, you get in your car, get out at the other side, and you don't really even remember the drive because you're unconsciously competent within the drive. And the same is true with skills. There will come a time, and this is my promise, that there will come a time where the skills just disappear, and it's just a session, and it's you and them, and they just come out naturally. But they come out naturally because of the practice. And in practice, we need feedback. So it's part of the process. Don't take it to heart. Take it as learning. Don't take everything that everyone says as the truth. Measure it against what you feel as well. And if you can, just enjoy the process, because you don't get feedback from your clients. They won't say, hey, I could have done with a spot more silence there and a bit more reflection. So it's that golden opportunity to get others feeding back on how it was for them.